It is 1780. The Empress has just died. Her portrait is frozen on a silver coin, 28 grams of metal, 40 millimeters wide, with a Latin inscription along the edge that translates to, "Justice is the foundation of kingdoms." That coin is still being minted. Today. Right now. With the same date, the same portrait, the same silver content, not as a commemorative, not as a museum piece, as money. Somewhere between then and now, 6 empires rose and fell. 20 currencies appeared and vanished. Governments printed, debased, redenominated, and abandoned their promises so many times that the word sovereign became a synonym for unreliable. And through all of it, the Thaler survived. This is Unseen Hand, revealing the hidden forces that shaped money, empires, and your future. Here is what nobody tells you about the Maria Theresa Thaler. This was not a coin that spread because an empire forced it on conquered subjects. The British had an empire. The French had an empire. The Italians, the Portuguese, the Dutch, all of them had empires, armies, and central banks backing their currencies at gunpoint. Every one of their currencies failed in the eastern trade zones. Not because of bad policy, not because of war, because traders on the ground looked at the paper, looked at the coin, weighed both in their hands, and made a choice. The Thaler succeeded because it was chosen, voluntarily, repeatedly, by people who had every reason to distrust the Europeans claiming to help them. That is the question this video is really asking. Not, what made this coin popular? But, what makes any money trusted at the edges of empire? And why do the powerful keep failing to understand the answer? The year is 1741. The Habsburg Empire is in crisis. Charles II has just died without a male heir, and his daughter Maria Theresa, 23 years old, recently crowned, is fighting 4 wars simultaneously to hold her inheritance together. She needs money. All sovereigns in crisis need money. But Maria Theresa is unusual. She needs money that other people will actually accept. Her empire borders the Ottoman trade routes. Her merchants need coins that Yemeni spice traders will take without argument. For nearly 4 decades, the thaler spread. Merchants in the Red Sea ports began demanding it specifically. Not the French écu, not the Spanish real, the thaler, with the woman's face and the double-headed eagle on the reverse. Then she died. And here is where the Austrian authorities made a decision that seems almost irrational from a modern perspective. They froze the coin, locked the date at 1780, locked her portrait at its final form, locked the weight, the fineness, the diameter, the edge inscription. Every thaler struck after that day, whether in 1800 or 1900 or 2026, would be identical to the last coin struck before the Empress died. 389 million identical coins later, the Austrian Mint is still honoring that decision. To understand why the thaler worked where every other coin failed, you need to think about what money actually is, not what governments say it is, but what it does in practice. Money is a coordination tool. It lets strangers transact without requiring trust in each other, because they both trust the money itself. The question is, what grounds that trust? Most modern money answers that question with authority. Central bank guarantee, government legal tender laws, the threat of imprisonment if you refuse to accept it. The British pound was legal tender because the British Empire would arrest you for using anything else. The thaler answered it with verification. No government stamp required at the point of sale. No promise to honor it later. Just pick it up, weigh it, check the diameter, run your thumb along the edge inscription. If it matches, it's real. It's worth the same as every other one, and you can trade it tomorrow to someone who will do the exact same check. This is what economists call a commodity money with extremely low verification costs. The thaler contained its own proof of value in its physical properties. You didn't need to know anything about Austrian politics. You didn't need to trust Vienna. You needed to know what 28 grams of 83.3% silver looked like. And here is the part that colonial administrators never grasped, no matter how many times they witnessed it. The trust was held not by any institution, but by the network of traders who had repeatedly verified the coin. Remove Vienna from the equation entirely, and the coin still worked. Because the coin was not a promise from Vienna, it was a proven object, one that had passed through 10,000 hands without ever lying. By the mid-19th century, the thaler's reach was staggering. Follow a single coin. A thaler leaves the Vienna Mint in 1855. It travels to Trieste, then the main Austrian port, loaded onto a merchant vessel headed for Alexandria. In Alexandria, it changes hands at a cotton trader's stall. From there, it moves south by Red Sea Dhow to Aden, then a British crown colony that had its own official currency. The thaler is not legal tender in Aden. The British authorities have said as much. The Adeni merchants accept it anyway, because the merchants in the highland markets of Abyssinia, where the Aden traders send their cloth and coffee, will only accept thalers, not rupees, not sterling, thalers. In Harar, the great walled city of eastern Ethiopia, a Muslim trading center that had been closed to European visitors until 1854, the thaler functions as the primary unit of account, not as one option among many, as the option. Prices quoted in thalers, contracts written in thalers, debts owed in thalers. From Harar, the coin might travel west into the Sudan, or north through the highlands to Massawa on the Red Sea coast, where it joins another trading dhow heading to Muscat. In Muscat, the gateway to the Persian Gulf trade, the thaler is again accepted as the standard coin for large transactions. Some thalers made it as far as India. The East India Company's records note the thaler's acceptance in ports along the western Indian coast, particularly for trade with Arab merchants who insisted on being paid in the coin they trusted. One coin, one design, one silver standard, operating across 4 continents, across Christian and Muslim and animist and Hindu trading communities, without a single central authority coordinating it. That network was worth more than any colonial currency, because it had been built by the traders themselves, one verified transaction at a time, over more than a century. In October 1935, Benito Mussolini launched the invasion of Ethiopia. By May 1936, after bombing civilian populations with mustard gas, his forces entered Addis Ababa. Marshal Pietro Badoglio, appointed Viceroy of Italian East Africa, issued a proclamation. The Maria Theresa Thaler was to be replaced immediately by the Italian East Africa lira. The exchange rate was fixed by decree. 1 thaler equaled 5 lire. Acceptance of the new currency was mandatory. Refusal was a crime. Badoglio's administration understood the challenge. They had studied the thaler's dominance. They knew Ethiopian merchants had been using it for over a century. They believed, as all colonial administrators believe, that authority properly applied could reshape behavior. They were wrong. Ethiopian merchants, farmers, and highland traders refused to use the lira for any transaction that mattered. When Italian officials paid for supplies in lira, sellers quoted prices that reflected a massive discount against the thaler rate. The 5-to-1 official exchange was a fiction. In actual markets, thalers commanded whatever premium the seller demanded, because the seller knew that the buyer would eventually need thalers to transact with anyone who was not an Italian soldier. The lira circulated like hot coals. The moment a merchant received them, they converted to thalers as fast as possible. This is called Gresham's Law. Bad money drives out good. But here it ran in reverse. The trusted money survived. The mandated money circulated like a penalty. By 1938, the Italian colonial government was forced to admit partial defeat. They continued to demand tax payments in lira, but gave up on banning the thaler from private trade. An occupying empire, one of the major industrial powers of the 20th century, with a standing army and a colonial administration, had tried and failed to replace a dead empress's coin. Ethiopia regained independence in 1941 when British forces expelled the Italians. The thaler returned to legal tender status immediately. In 1945, Ethiopia finally retired it officially, not because it had lost value, but because Emperor Haile Selassie wanted a modern banking system, and the thaler made it difficult to control monetary policy. Even then, even when the Ethiopian government formally withdrew it, the thaler continued to circulate in rural markets for decades. Because official retirement is not the same as trust expiring. Here is the thing that every government discovers too late. You can build a currency system in months, print notes, establish a central bank, pass laws, hire enforcers. The machinery of monetary authority is not particularly difficult to construct. What you cannot build in months, or years, or decades is a trust network. A trust network is not built by governments. It is built by individual people making individual decisions, tens of thousands of them, each one saying, I will accept this coin because the person I transact with next will also accept this coin, because I have seen them verify it, because I have verified it myself. That network took the thaler a century to build. The Italian lira had no network. It had decrees, and decrees without the network underneath them are just paper. This is not unique to Ethiopia. The British tried to replace the thaler in Sudan and failed. Post-independence governments in Somalia and Yemen tried to phase it out and found it persisting in rural trade for years afterward. The Saudi government in the 1950s made concerted efforts to establish the rial as the sole currency in Yemen, and found thalers circulating alongside it in the highland markets for another decade. 5 separate attempts by sophisticated state actors to kill one silver coin. 5 failures. The question worth sitting with is this: what does it say about modern monetary systems that they learned so little from this? After World War II, the Austrian Mint, now part of the Second Austrian Republic, faced a decision about the coin. For centuries, the thaler had been struck at multiple mints across the Habsburg Empire: Vienna, London, Birmingham, Brussels, Bombay. After 1945, production consolidated in Vienna. What the Austrians discovered was this: demand never stopped. Each decade, buyers appeared: collectors in Europe, investors in North America, traders along the Red Sea coast who still recognized the coin as a reliable store of value. The thaler had outlived every currency that had ever tried to replace it. Today, the Austrian Mint produces roughly 200,000 to 300,000 restrikes per year. They sell them for a modest premium over silver spot price, typically between 15 and 40% above metal value. The buyers are a mix of investors, coin collectors, and, most significantly, traders in the Horn of Africa who still carry them as a portable store of value in regions where the local banking system cannot be trusted. In Somalia, which has operated for decades without a functioning central bank, the thaler is not a curiosity, it is financial infrastructure. In a country where every government-issued currency has collapsed at least once in living memory, silver that weighs the same as it weighed in 1780 is not nostalgia. It is rational. Think about what the thaler tells us about the present moment. Every country that is currently experiencing currency collapse, and in 2026 that list is not short, has populations reaching for the same answer the African traders reached for 2 centuries ago. Something predictable, something outside the sovereign's reach, something that cannot be reprinted in a political crisis. In Lebanon, where the lira lost over 95% of its value between 2019 and 2024, ordinary people adopted US dollars as their real currency, not because America told them to, but because they needed something that couldn't be debased by the Banque du Liban overnight. The mechanism is identical to what happened in Addis Ababa in 1937. In 2023, the Nigerian government restricted bank cash withdrawals to force adoption of its new digital currency, the naira. The policy produced mass protests, political chaos, and almost no CBDC adoption. Nigerians, who had watched the naira lose 75% of its value in 2 years, were not interested in a government-issued digital token. They held dollars. They held crypto. They held anything that wasn't the sovereign's promise. El Salvador's Bitcoin law in 2021 offers a slightly different lesson. The government declared Bitcoin legal tender and gave every citizen $30 in a government wallet. Most people cashed it out within weeks and went back to dollars. Why? Because Bitcoin, for all its properties, hadn't yet built the trust network the Thaler had spent a century building in East Africa. The decree existed. The network didn't. The pattern is not complicated. Governments that understand monetary trust build it slowly through demonstrated reliability. Governments that don't understand it try to mandate it, and then blame the population for failing to comply. The Maria Theresa Thaler has been minted for 246 years. Its edge inscription reads, "Justice is the foundation of kingdoms." The Austrian court chose those words for a political reason, a Habsburg claim to legitimacy. But it turned out to be an accidental description of why the coin itself survived. The thaler was just. It weighed what it weighed. It was worth what it was worth. It did not expand to fund a war. It did not shrink when a new government needed revenue. It did not reprogram itself to expire if you held it too long or spent it on the wrong things. Now, central banks around the world are developing central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, that will be programmable, money that can be given an expiration date, money that cannot be spent on prohibited goods, money that can be frozen the moment you become politically inconvenient, money that knows where you are, what you bought, and who you gave it to. They will call it innovation. They will call it financial inclusion. They will call it a more efficient payment system. And in the markets of Addis Ababa and Mogadishu, and in the informal economies of people who have lived through enough broken promises to know the difference, they will weigh it in their hands, and they will find it wanting. Because trust built from the bottom up, by millions of people making millions of voluntary choices, is worth more than any system that requires you to trust the one who issued it. The Maria Theresa Thaler has been minted for 246 years. 6 empires failed to kill it. 14 governments tried to replace it. 1 dictator threatened jail for refusing the substitute. The coin outlasted all of them. The question isn't whether your government's money is legal tender. The question is, will it still be worth something once the people who issued it are gone? If this gave you a new perspective on what actually survives, hit subscribe. History has the answers. We show you where to look.